Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I want to talk a little bit about Weapons of Legacy. This was a 3.5 D&D book that came out in July of 2005 and was part of the trend of alternate system books. You had the Expanded Sonics Handbook, you had the Magic of Incarnum, you had the Tome of Magic, which had 3 different types of magical character classes, and you had Weapons of Legacy. Weapons of Legacy is a book that gives you an ability to create magic items that scale in power with characters' levels. However, it's not something where it's just done immediately or automatically. It's something where you find the item, you discover that the item is an item of legacy. The book is called Weapons of Legacy, but there are like magic rings, there's like suit of magic armor, there's a scarab, which is like a magical pendant. So they're not all actually weapons in this book, but when you find them, they look like mundane items at first, although the DM will probably go a lot more into detail about their appearance, which is probably something that metagaming-wise should tip you off. But each item also has like an omen, some sort of thing that occurs under certain circumstances that a normal magic item wouldn't do. Once you discover that you have a legacy item, what you do is you research it using history checks, and based off of the results that you get as you do these, periodic researching into the item, you can unlock rituals which you can perform to start unlocking abilities that the items grant. So the legacy abilities come in 3 forms. There are the least legacy abilities, the lesser abilities, and then the greater abilities. Each level has its own subsequent ritual that you have to discover through research and then perform the specific ritual. Once you complete the ritual and pay the associated gold piece cost and making sure that you meet the other prerequisites that the item has in order to be used, you can start gaining the abilities. However, there is a bit of a drawback to this in that the weapon forms, or the item forms, a more or less spiritual connection with you, and it does draw some of your life force to power the abilities that the item grants. So that can take the form of penalties to things like attack rolls, ability checks, skill checks. You may have to sacrifice a certain number of skill points or hit points, or reduce your effective caster level, or even do things like give up specific level spell slots. But if you do all that, then you gain the abilities, which usually try to counterbalance somewhat what we have here. So let's just take a look at one of the items in this book, just to sort of give you an idea of the things that you need to do in order to start gaining the abilities, and some of the abilities that you can gain. So we got the Blood Crier's Hammer here. The standard version of it, when you first find it, before you learn that it's a legacy item and start unlocking its abilities, it functions just as a large size +1 warhammer that a medium-sized creature would have to use two-handed. However, its omen states that if you have the item on your person in combat and you either have it stowed and you don't use it in any given round, rounds where it's not being utilized, it will actually cry out and moan and bemoan the fact that it's not being used. And if you do use it in combat, the weapon here has what looks like skulls on either side of the hammerheads. And if you're wielding it as a weapon in combat, then these skulls, the eye sockets, will leak a viscous red fluid, why it's called the Blood Crier Hammer. So if you start seeing stuff like that, you probably realize that there's a bit more to this than meets the eye. So you can start researching it. You can learn some general stuff typically with the DC 15 history check. Then the DC 18 check gives you the least ritual that you need to complete to gain access to the least abilities that the item grants. A DC 25 gives you the lesser abilities, and then the DC 31 typically gives you the greater ability, the ritual that you have to do to unlock the greater abilities. The DC values might vary somewhat from item to item, but they're typically along those lines. To unlock some of the abilities for this, the least ritual is called Trial by Earth, and it states that you must defeat a creature of the Earth subtype in personal combat, so 1v1. The creature's CR challenge rating must be equal to or greater than your character level, and it also costs 2,200 gold pieces, I should say. Once you complete the ritual, you are granted the least legacy Blood Crier's Hammer feat. So it does utilize feats to gain access to the abilities, but you don't take the feats through your regular leveling. You get them solely through completing these rituals. You also have to meet the other prerequisites in order to start unlocking the ability. So for example, this item requires you to have a +2 base attack bonus, a +2 or 2 ranks in the history knowledge skill, and the ability to speak Dwarven. So if you meet those and you do this, you unlock the least abilities that the weapon grants. Then for the lesser ritual, it's called Morning Service. It says you were required to pay homage at the grave of Crier. So he was the creature, he was the dwarf that forged the weapon in the first place and was the one that established the legacy. So you have to go to his grave, which is lost in the center of a sighing waste. Interesting description there. And then the greater ability, the greater ritual, is called Judgment of the Scablands. So you have to spend 3 days in the extreme heat of the desert Scablands without food, water, weapons, or shelter. Survival is not necessary to successfully complete the ritual. So you can just go into the desert and die as long as it's, at least 3 days before you get resurrected again. Then yeah, technically you can gain the benefit. The lesser ritual costs 12,500 gold, and the greater ritual costs 40,500 gold. And like I said, you gain the feats and you start unlocking the abilities. Some of the abilities include Earthseeker, so you gain that at 6th level, and which allows you to detect Earth-type, subtype creatures within a 60-foot area of you. You'd have to concentrate as a standard action to do so, and the weapon ignores the damage reduction for any Earth subtype creature. So if something has, like an Earth creature has DR of say 10/adamantine, if you're using this weapon and you've unlocked the least legacy ritual and have the Earthseeker ability, then you ignore that damage reduction altogether. You also get Pathbreaker, so beginning at 7th level, once per day, when Blood Crier's Hammer is struck against a lid, door, valve, portal, normal bars, shackles, chains, bolts, and so on, a mournful tone rings forth. The struck item opens 1 round later. Blood Crier's Hammer also automatically dispels a hold person spell or even an arcane lock with a caster level lower than 15th. Each strike opens only 1 form of locking, so if a chained, padlock, locked, and arcane locked door, for example, it takes 4 strikes to open it, and you can only do it once per day, so it's 4 days to open 1 portal, and a silent spell will negate the power. Another ability that it gets is Earthen Stature, so you can change size while standing on solid earth or stone. Starting at 8th level, you can issue a command word to use the enlarged person once per day, self only. As the spell at 12th level, you can use this ability at will. So that's probably one of the reasons why it is large size, because eventually you can actually make yourself, if you're a medium-sized character, you can make yourself large. Then you have the Earth Provides at 9th level or higher. You need not eat or drink while underground or in any place with the Earth dominant elemental trait. So it's kind of like a sustenance ability just for you. Then there's Deny Earth's Embrace, so at 10th level and higher, you need no longer fear the unforgiving crush of the earth after a fall. This ability acts exactly like a Featherfall spell, and it is activated immediately if you fall more than 5 feet. At 15th level, you gain Stony Resistance. You gain a +2 resistance bonus on all saving throws, and that's actually something that's good to know, because we'll talk about that here in a moment. You get Meld into Stone at 16th level, where you can cast it as the spell equal to a 10th level spellcaster. And then you get Terra Obscura at 17th level, so at 17th level and higher, while you remain in contact with solid earth or stone, Blood Crier's Hammer cannot be detected remotely through scrying, remote viewing, or other means of divination, divination. as if continually affected by an obscure object spell. At 18th level, you can gain the Wall of Stone 2 times per day, holding Bloodcrier's Hammer 4th and speaking the command word. You can use it as a 15th level caster. Earthwalker's Bane at 19th level in your hands. Bloodcrier's Hammer is an effective enhancement, or has an effective enhancement bonus 1 better than normal, and deals an extra 1d6 damage against any creature in contact with solid earth or stone. And then you get Ignore Earth's Clutch. So at 20th level and higher, so there are epic levels. That's also why it can go beyond just a +5 weapon, because of like the epic level thing. So yeah, at 20th level or higher, you continually gain the benefit of freedom of movement while standing on solid earth or stone, and it's equal to cast level 15th. Each item will also give you an adventure seed, so it's usually an encounter or a location where the item can either be found or a creature that is actually currently wielding the item that you have to defeat. And if it's like the creature, it'll also give you, like I said, a location. As well as some other encounter information. So each legacy item actually does give you an adventure concept that you can sort of expand upon to incorporate the items into the game. So those are the benefits that you get. But like I said, there are drawbacks. Let's just take a look here. So you can see on the chart, you've got the level. So each legacy item, you have to be at least 5th level to use. So levels 15 through 20. You get the abilities that it grants on this side, but then we've got this personal cost chart. So each of these items at various levels will have you pay a personal cost to unlock the item's abilities. You also have to have paid the personal cost for lower level abilities in order to get an item or get an ability that is higher level than that. So you can't just pick and choose. You do have to go through each of them as you unlock the rituals for least, lesser, and greater. So, for example, this one has an attack penalty, a save penalty, and hit point loss that you suffer as you progress through levels to gain some of the abilities that you get here. Now, most of these, not all of them, but most of the abilities that you suffer like personal costs for, a lot of the items will have ways of offsetting that. So, for example, you do suffer ultimately a -2 penalty on all of your attacks. If you start gaining all the abilities that this weapon has, as well as up to a -3 penalty on all saving throws. But it does become eventually a +5 Warhammer, and it does grant you an ability, Stony Resistance, which gives you a +2 bonus on all saving throws. So you give up a -3 on your saving throws, but you get back, +2. So a lot of things do get offset. There's also some abilities, for example, or some weapons or items that require you to give up caster level and to give up specific spell slots. So you may have to give up a 1st level spell slot, and at some point you might have to sacrifice an effective caster level in order to gain some of the abilities. But if you're giving up a spell slot, it will typically give you an ability that is similar to a spell of that same level that you can do multiple times per day. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. So ultimately, it's a great way of having these sort of customizable, upgradable items that do so automatically, while also incorporating lore and history into your game, providing a bit more flavor and a bit more of a sense of like just the fact that, there's better things out there than just a +1 Warhammer, for example. They may find Bloodcrier's Hammer. Now, we talked about like the rituals of least, lesser, and greater, and abilities that are least, lesser, and greater. And this is one of the parts where the book unfortunately falls a little bit short, because at no point does the book really tell you which abilities are least, lesser, or greater. It's not listed in the chart. It's not listed in the ability description. It's not even really listed in the feats. So if we go to the feats here, so let's go back to the feats. So it says least legacy, prerequisites, character level 5, learn and perform the associated ritual, and the benefit says choose one item. So when you do this, you perform the ritual. The ritual tells you which item, obviously, but it says you perform the ritual if you meet the other prerequisites for wielding the item. You can use any of the item's least abilities that are available to a character of your level. That's all. That's all it says. So it doesn't tell you, again, which ones are least. It doesn't tell you what levels those really are. And this was something that I was never really clarified in any other future book either, which was kind of frustrating because the Book of Nine Swords, the Tome of Battle Book of Nine Swords, also has legacy items, and they literally copy and paste. So the information where they could have provided a bit more clarification, it's not there at all. So even in that book, it doesn't really tell you how this works. So you have to look at the levels that the feats have for prerequisites. So for least legacy, you have to be a minimum of 5th level, which we've stated. You have to be at least 5th level in order to use any of the legacy abilities. Lesser, the character level has to be level 11. And then for greater, the character level has to be 17th. So again, it doesn't actually tell you in the book, but the way that it works is that the least abilities are the abilities of levels 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. The lesser abilities are at level 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. And then the greater abilities are the abilities that you would gain at levels 17, 18, 19, and 20. So if we go back to our chart here for the Blood Crier Hammer, just the example that we're using because it's the first one. So the lesser abilities are to have it be a +2 Warhammer, which is the 5th level ability, Earth Seeker, Pathbreaker, Earth and Stature once per day. And we've also got the Earth Provides and Deny Earth's Embrace. So those are all the least abilities that it provides. The lesser abilities are turning into a +3 Warhammer, Earth and Stature at Will, and then it becoming a +4 Warhammer, Stony Resistance, which gives you the saving throw bonus, and the Meld into Stone once per day. So those are the lesser abilities. And then the greater abilities are it becoming a +5 Warhammer, getting Terra Obscura, Wall of Stone, Earthwalker's Bane, and Ignore Earth's Clutch. So those are the greater abilities. So it would have been nice if the book actually explained that, and unfortunately it just never did. And that was one of the things that people were kind of questioning even back in July of 2005. Like for this video, I actually went back and looked it up just to see if there were forum posts or discussions, and I came across at least a few where people were like, how do you know if it's least, lesser, or greater? Now later on in the book, it does give you rules for creating your own legacy items. So like it gives you like the rituals, like you design the rituals, and then it gives you options for, you know, what the personal costs are, the connection, the things that you have to sacrifice in order to gain the benefits, the cost for the rituals that you have to perform in order to gain the abilities, and then it gives you menus for each of the least, lesser, and greater. So there's 3 menus for each level, least, lesser, and greater, and you can sort of see the things that they give you here. They don't all line up exactly with abilities that are granted by the items previously in the book, but at least, you know, it gives you an option to create your own. And as you sort of look at these abilities, you sort of see the kinds of things that they grant at the least level, at the lesser value or level, and at the greater level. It sort of helps you kind of understand which ones are basically, you know, at what level. And it does kind of state in here, so it says you choose one ability at 17th level and then one for each additional up to 20th level. But again, that's buried like kind of deep in the book. So that's something that, like, the description of which abilities are least, lesser, or greater really need to be in the front of the book, not in the back of the book after you've already read through all of the items. And even here, it's like, it's sort of clear, but not as clear as it could have been. And like I said, there were a lot of forum posts and discussions back in 2005 about how the items actually worked. So you do get the rules for designing your own, which does help clarify things a little bit. But again, that's buried a little bit back further and not where you would expect it to be. And it's not all spelled out in one place either, which is kind of, again, a little bit frustrating. But there's also another cool thing that this book does as well, which takes some established magic items and actually turns them into legacy items. So, for example, we have, let's see if we can find it here. We have things like the Holy Avenger. So you can turn the Holy Avenger into a legacy item instead of it just being a static weapon that's always the same whenever you find it. So you can actually turn that into a legacy item. There's also like the Staff of Power that you can do that with as well. And it gives you ideas that you can, sort of a baseline that you can use to turn specific magic items from the DMG or other books into these legacy items, which again is really kind of a cool concept. And overall, like, I like the idea, and I like it so much that even before this book came out, I was doing something similar in my 3.5 game. I was running like an epic high fantasy campaign where I had each of the players in the campaign choose their signature item. And once they reached a certain point in the campaign, their signature item started gaining new abilities every time they gained a character level. Now, this was before Weapons of Legacy came out, so there were no personal costs that had to be paid. It was just that they were the only ones that would gain the benefit from it. So if they lost their weapon and somebody else found it, they would never be able to gain the benefits of it that the actual player characters did, because those items were bonded specifically to them. And I only had it giving them things like, the extra +1 bonuses for the weapons or armor, as well as like abilities from the DMG. Like the weapon would gain like magical pluses, and they would also gain like the axiomatic, which was like the lawful damage, and like holy. And at certain levels, it would grant them like certain spell-like abilities or even like effective feats. So my paladin, for example, his sword would grant him things at certain levels like extra smiting, which allowed him to smite like an extra 1 or 2 times per day. There was epic smiting, which allowed him to essentially like re-add his level again to his smite damage, because smite was 1 point, I think, per level of damage that you would do when you did the smite. The epic smiting allowed you to double that, and each time that you took the feat again, it would sort of stack a multiplier. So the second time you took the feat, you'd be adding your level 3 times, and then so on and so forth. So that was sort of the stuff that those weapons were granting. So I like the ability, I like the concept, and it's kind of a shame that they never really did revisit this in either 4th or even nowadays with 5th edition. I can't think of any official 5th edition books where you have magic items that actually go up in power as you do. So I think it would have been kind of cool to have. And I don't even mind the concept of the personal cost, like giving up things like skill ranks, for example. You would just take, if you had to give up 2 skill ranks, you just choose any 2 skill ranks that you've assigned previously. They don't have to be from the same skill. They don't have to be from a particular skill either. You just choose 2 skill points and you would give them up. So I don't actually mind that. And if you are finding that you don't like the personal cost versus what you gain from it, you can do a ritual to renounce the legacy of the item, where you sever the connection. You no longer gain benefit of the legacy feats, but you also immediately regain everything that you gave up for the personal cost. So there were balances there sort of in place. And a lot of items will offset most of, if not all of, the things that you're giving up. Like you're giving up for the Blood Crier's Hammer up to -3 penalty on all your saving throws, but you eventually gain an ability which gives you a +2 bonus on all of your saving throws. So you only have a net loss of -1. The same thing with the attack bonus. You suffer a -2 penalty to your attacks, but the weapon gets up to a +5 and technically has an enhancement bonus of 1 higher against certain creatures. So, it offsets that pretty well. The hit point cost, unfortunately, you don't really get that back in any way, shape, or form from the items, but giving up, a couple of hit points at certain levels isn't that bad overall. So it's a really interesting concept. The biggest issue with it is just the fact that it wasn't really clearly explained how it worked, or what the abilities were what. And it could have been so easy to do. You could have either just had least, lesser, or greater in parentheses next to the ability description in the text below, or you could have even had it in the chart. For example, you could have just had least ability every level for level 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. You could have had lesser in the chart for levels 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. Then you could have had greater in the chart for levels, 17, 18, 19, or 20. Or just have lesser abilities in the chart at level 5, have least abilities at level 5, have lesser abilities in the chart at level 11, and then have the greater abilities in the chart at level 17, and it would have made things a lot clearer. And I think because I'd already designed my own legacy items, I didn't actually read the rules very thoroughly for designing my own legacy items for my 3.5 campaign, because I've already done that and I've already implemented it and the players were already using them. So I wasn't going to change it at that point. So that kind of, because I wasn't focusing on that aspect of it, it just was never super clear which were least, lesser, or greater. And that was a problem that, again, several people had back in the day. So I guess it's an example of, again, a really cool concept with just really poor clarification, to the point where, because it was not so clear and so easy to figure out which were the least, lesser, or greater abilities, a lot of people just didn't use the book. I don't really know too many people that were doing 3.5 that actually used Weapons of Legacy. I knew people that owned the book, but I don't know too many people that actually implemented it into their campaign. So it's kind of a shame. But looking back at it, like I said, it's a cool concept, and I wish they would do something with it nowadays in modern D&D. And I think it might be kind of fun to take the item creation rules in this book and actually create our own Weapon of Legacy in a future video. So that's something that I'm going to probably do maybe in a week's time or so, and actually make a Weapon of Legacy using the rules in this book. So that's kind of like, I was thinking about it. In my current 3.5 campaign, Roll Stats is playing a dwarf fighter, and he has created his own magic item, which I think it's only like a +1 great axe, but he's given it a name. It has like its own sort of personality. He incorporates it into like the way that his character sort of acts. And even though I don't want to introduce too many elements outside of the core rules into the campaign, it might be kind of fun to toy with the idea of turning that into a Weapon of Legacy, but we'll see how that goes. At the very least, though, I do want to make a video creating an item, and I just want to raise awareness that this was a thing that was out there if the idea sounds interesting to you, and hopefully clarify the way that it was actually meant to be done in the 3.5 era. So there we have Weapons of Legacy. Like I said, I just wanted to talk about the concept in this video more than anything specific. So if you want me to do a full flip through and sort of discuss, or not, maybe not discuss, but at least show each of the pre-made items that is in this book, let me know that in the comments below, and I'll be more than happy to do so. Anyway, let me know also, did you guys use Weapons of Legacy back when you were running or playing in your 3.5 games? Did you use it from this book in particular, or if you used it, did you get them from the Tome of Battle, the Book of Nine Swords, or was that a section of that book that you also ignored? Let me know all that stuff in the comments below, and I look forward to reading your guys' responses. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Until then, take care.